Hey, what is up guys, and welcome back to a brand new video. So, a while back I came upon a question after watching a movie. A small one really, titled, The Hobbit, The Desolation of Smaug. How big is Smaug, I wondered, and how big is Deathwing in comparison to that? After which followed a loss in curiosity over the size of Smaug, and an increased curiosity in Deathwing's size, which I've never found a solid answer to in the relatively long time I've wondered this. So today, I set out to put that question to rest with some, to say the least, very sloppy maths. That being said, understand that going forward, none of the numbers I use for reference are official numbers, except for when I specifically say they are from official sources. Also on that note, after doing the estimations I did for this video, I found an official source on how wide his wingspan is, which more or less invalidates the point of making this video, but I'll be damned if this video is going in the trash. If you want to see the official number and the other numbers extrapolated from that one, stick around to the end to see it. I'll share the source for you to check out. Anyway, if you enjoy the video after finishing it, be sure to smash that like button and leave a comment on the video letting me know what you think. Be sure to get subscribed, and if you haven't yet, ring that little bell to get notifications for when I upload. So my first thought for where would be best to get the size of Deathwing was, of course, Dragon Soul, considering he's the sole focus of that raid. So I entered that raid and tried getting some sort of valid reference from the ground. Shortly after attempting this, I realized it was of no use, and I gave up and figured I'd move on to why I initially came here, for the Spine of Deathwing. After clearing a couple bosses, I was atop the Wyrmrest Tower waiting for dialogue to pass. In running around up here, it dawned upon me. Deathwing is casting this fiery or magma ball down to the ground, and I can clearly see how big that ball is in comparison to him. My thoughts were, maybe I could measure the fireball against him, then measure the fireball against the tower, then lastly the tower against myself. I decided offing myself would be a fun thing to do, but then I'd get right back on the task. So I waited for him to cast his fiery balls at the tower. Then after capturing that, I tried comparing my size against the tower immediately, which I quickly realized was a bad idea. I moved on to compare my height against the base of this pillar at the tower entrance. An important reason I'd want to do this is because, in the manual that came with the Burning Crusade expansion pack, there was a small official chart which denoted the height of each of the player races, both male and female. Amongst these, of course, is the human, which my non-Worgen form happens to be. So we can see the female humans have a height of about 5.7 feet. From this we can say that since my character is 78 pixels tall and the pillar base is 351 pixels tall, the pillar base is a conveniently round 4.5 female humans tall, which ends up being 25.6 feet. After this we can go to the frame with the whole column and get a rectangle up for how big the pillar base is in this context, and compare that against the pillar. I'm going to start the bottom of the rectangle off from the base slightly to adjust for the perspective, going off what feels about right. In this context, the pillar ends up being about 6.5 pillar bases tall, or 166.7 feet. Now going back to compare the pillar against the tower, the part of the tower we care about seems to be about 2.7 pillars tall, or about 450.2 feet. From this same perspective we can get the height of this little rim thing, which is about 67.3 feet, leaving the specific region of this rim thing we want to compare as 49.8 feet tall. After we get the height of that portion of the rim thing, we can go to a different frame and compare that against the fiery ball, getting a final fireball size of 43.5 feet. This can then be compared to Deathwing. Next we want to get the size of Deathwing against one of his fiery balls. What am I doing? This seemed like an interesting idea at first. To do this, I'm first going to get the size of the fireball, then after that we need to get Deathwing flat against the background so that he can be measured in rectangles. To accomplish this, I'm going to open up WoW Model Viewer, attempt to load the background in, only for it to fail such a simple task, then convert the image to something else to have WoW Model Viewer accept the image as his background. Then I'm going to pick the animation I think Deathwing is currently using. Then I'm going to fiddle with the attributes and frame of the animation next to Deathwing in the sky to get it as close as possible. Good enough. The point of all of this part is specifically to get the scale or Z position right. The reason for that is that I can remove the background, change the animation to his default stand, reset the rotations, and pause the animation. This will give a flat horizontal view of him. I can then save that as a picture, open it up and remove the colored background, and pull it back into Illustrator. At this point I can now draw out the rectangles for his height. After that I'll move the rectangles I've made around and scale them up to be correct relative to each other. Using this I can conclude Deathwing to his head is about 92.9 feet tall, which translates to a length of 340 feet. Not bad, but I feel like this doesn't quite do his size justice, so I looked for another source in-game that showed his size. There's a quest in High Mountain called Titanic Showdown that shows a vision of Deathwing, but I think it's more than safe to say that him being that size just doesn't quite look right when compared against Dragon Soul. Or say, more importantly, the Cataclysm cinematic where you see him walking onto the Stormwind Bridge. Oh, but there is one quest series in Badlands that is 3 different, imaginative stories of an encounter with Deathwing, Talking with Theldurin the Lost, we can get the first of these 3 quests, the day that Deathwing came. Theldurin tells us how he ran through this valley punching dang blasted rock elementals, gold-dirt rock heaps, and ultimately Deathwing. Unfortunately, the non-dragon form of him though. Lucian Tosselwrench tells another story, saying Theldurin was wrong and giving us the quest the day that Deathwing came, the real story. Lucian tells us how he shrunk the whole world to make himself big enough to grab Deathwing. Then he goes searching through some clouds until he finds Deathwing inside the sun of all places and flings him to Kalimdor like the great god that Lucian must be. Then Martek the Exiled gives us the quest, the day that Deathwing came, what really happened, in which Martek tells us he was on his Mechanohog showing it off to some, hot babes. You have to pick one to save and ride through the valley with, so I picked the hottest babe of course. After reaching the end of the valley, Martek remembers his Mechanohog can, fly I guess? So he flew up to a plateau where Deathwing was, sharing a tender moment with his strapping blood elf babe along the way. Before you can get the climax of Martek's story, Theldurin and Lucian chime in to say that it was really their stories all along that were the real ones, and Martek shuts the whole show down. That's all fun and whatnot, but the real thing to focus on here is Lucian's story. The reasons why being that he changes sizes, we can compare him to the size of objects in the environment, he grabs Deathwing, the actual dragon form, and, well, you can see where I'm going with this. Right off the bat, we can head on over to this little Alliance encampment where we'll find griffin roosts. After that, we can use the World Shrinker to go as big as we're going to get and compare the size of the griffin roost to the size of Lucian. After that, we can carry on through the rest of the quest and find the sun behind one of the clouds and grab Deathwing from within the sun. The sun, by the way, if it's not obvious, definitely not being to scale. Any which way, clunky as this scene might be, we have a visual of Deathwing. So, following what we did, I'm going to take a screenshot of Deathwing in frame and bring that into WoW Model Viewer after converting the image to the right format. Bringing up Deathwing's model again, we can play with the model and animation again, and this one ended up matching significantly better than the last one actually. So we can repeat the process done before to get his height compared to Lucian. After that, all that's needed is for me to go ahead and get a comparison of my height against the griffin roost so that we can put the heights to a number. Let's wrap that all up. One female human being 5.7 feet tall, we can conclude the griffin roost is 6.7 feet tall, which means Lucian's initial height is 14.6 feet tall, and his fully grown height is 121 feet or 21.2 female humans tall. Comparing the size of Deathwing against these rectangles puts the top of his head at 172.8 feet or 30.3 humans tall, and his length at 576.5 feet or a whopping 101.1 female humans heights long. This feels a little more accurate than the numbers I got earlier, especially when you consider the following. If you take the rectangle used to indicate the height of a human female and move that over top of the picture of Deathwing, this makes the size of the rectangle compared to his scales line up pretty closely to what we see in the Spine of Deathwing fight. Of course, despite looking everywhere for a reliable source of information online prior to making this video, it was conveniently after I had done all of this, research if you'd call it that I found a tweet from the official Warcraft Twitter stating his exact wingspan to be 365 meters wide, or a massive 1,200 feet wide, which would put his length right around 600 feet long, and the height of the ground to his head at 183 feet tall. So my estimations actually weren't too far off. To put this gargantuan size into perspective, that would mean that if Deathwing laid down flat on his side on a football field, not only would he cover it by length and width, he would nearly double the length. At 600 feet long, he's about 65% longer than a football field, and at 183 feet tall, his head is a little under 14% taller than a football field is wide. Another way of looking at this is to compare the size of Deathwing against the size of a Boeing 747-8, which is one of the largest jets in the world. This vehicle, being a monstrosity that can carry a mass of 467 people between continents, is 76.3 meters long, or 253 feet long. And this is Deathwing. If you've ever played Dungeons & Dragons, or for some other reason know what a Tarrasque is, this is what they look like. They're huge creatures, and to give an idea, this is the kind of description given to them. It is hoped that the Tarrasque is a solitary creature, some hideous abomination unleashed by the dark arts or by elder, forgotten gods to punish all of nature. That being said, this is how big they are. And this is Deathwing. Remember how I was curious about Smaug? His size is pretty well documented, although surprisingly smaller than I expected. This is about how big he is. And this is Deathwing. There's a bunch of different versions of Godzilla that are different sizes. That being said, here's the various Godzillas. And this is Deathwing. Yeah, the guy's pretty huge. So what can you do with this information? I don't know, probably nothing useful. But what I can tell you though, you have this information now. Also, I kind of wanted to see if I could estimate his weight based on some of this information, but I figured that may be a little too much time and a lot more guesswork than this video has already. I can give you what I did though, using a formula I found online to calculate the weight of farm animals, so in other words assuming Deathwing had fur instead of scales, and didn't have huge wings, a huge head, huge tail, huge legs, huge everything. And assuming he didn't have freaking metal built onto him like he does, and everything else that multiplies his weight, I got a number which is that he must be at least 8,715,937.993 pounds, or 4,357.97 tons at absolutely bare minimum. As I kind of joked at earlier, I don't know if this video is going to be interesting. It started off as an interesting idea to me, but the further along in the idea I got, the more and more stupid it seemed, and I have no idea if anyone's going to want to watch this at this point. If you did, and that's why you're here, and you've enjoyed it thus far, I'm glad you did. If you did, you should let me know by hitting that like button down below and commenting what you thought about the video. While you're down there, you could consider subscribing and hitting that little bell besides the subscribe button, because I plan to do more silly videos like this in the future. Anyway, that all being said, I've wasted enough of your time. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you have a fantastic rest of your day, and I'll see you next time.